This is MJ. I'm an author, I'm an artist, I'm an analyzer. Find out my work at mjmunoz.com. Welcome to Story Over Everything, episode 10. This is for March 17th, 2023, and my question, my topic, my thing I want to discuss is, how do you name characters? For the Growbug books right now, I am, I was stuck. I'm in an okay place. Well, let me start over. For the Growbug books, I have a bunch of characters to name. They are Growbugs, they are angelic, guardian angel type insects that are magical in their nature, and they're basically being angels on a mission from God. And that means that because I like accuracy and I like looking into the roots of things, angels have the names of, or part of the name of God, the L part on most of their names, like Michael, it's not Michael, it's Michael. Gabriel, it's not Gabriel, it's Gabriel. Different names like that. Raphael, another angel, it's Raphael. So it's I don't know what the the L in Hebrew means. Has something to do with power. Kings or lords or judges are called Elohim, but the L part is in the beginning there. I don't know what the Elohim part means necessarily because I'm a lay biblical scholar, so I don't really know as much as I could, but just giving you a little bit there. L is a common used word for God. I believe I would call, I guess, Arab or Arabic a Semitic language, and they call their God Allah as opposed to Elohim. Elohim, Allah. You can hear the similarities in there. You know, the la and the ha and the ah at the beginning. Anyway, so they're commonly related things. So what I did was I didn't necessarily want to use like a full name of God. So I went into etymology and I looked through the Bible and I found that there's a weird coincidence where there's a city called Luz, which is called the House of God by one of the patriarchs, Jacob. And Luz means light. And Luz, or Lux, L-U-X-L-U-Z, means light in like a couple different languages. Latin, Spanish, supposedly from what I've read, again, I'm a lay biblical scholar, it looks as if the Hebrew even for Luz means something very much like light, even though the Hebrew words for light or spark or flame or things like that are or and aish and ner, that's like a flame or a candle. So they don't sound like Luz, but somehow Luz also in Hebrew, according to multiple sources I looked at, seems to suggest a meaning of light as well. And I thought, well, if you're coming from a theological perspective, isn't God light anyway? Doesn't God light up the darkness? And you have to understand, my fellow writers who might be listening to this, or anybody who else is, I'm writing what I know. I'm writing from my perspective. My characters exist in a world where there's a godly figure, a divine figure, who orchestrates and executes things, if you will, which is how I believe our world runs. So I'm putting that worldview of mine into my fiction. So all of this background that I jumped immediately into, I hope it's not disoriented. I hope it's exciting instead. But it's all to basically get to the point, the meat, the question of this, which is, how do you name your characters? Well, I'm telling you how I name my characters, but I'm curious how y'all do it too, because I'm not done yet. I still have more characters to name, and I think I'll go ahead and name them in the interim before I get any feedback. But I still think it's a relevant topic as a writer, so I thought I would go ahead and talk about it. So, getting back to it, let me know in a little bit how you name your characters, and I will ask the question one more time after I continue telling you how I name my characters. So, I think about the context, I think about the culture, I think about the history. Based on that, the fact that these are guardian angel insects, I thought I want them all to have something like L in their names, which I wonder if angel has anything to do with that, but I don't think it does, just because it's a totally different language, and angel in Hebrew is malach, actually, so the word malach becomes angel in English, which there's no common sounds in there, really, and there's no root. Malach means messenger, but it also means angel. I think it can also mean like minister or prince. There's different contexts. Well, Hebrew is a very high context dependent language, so depending on what you're saying in what context, it can mean many different things, even though it's one word, or one word can have several meanings. I'm sure there are some words that have a singular meaning, but then there are others that have multiple meanings. Anyway, moving on from there. So I definitely want that fragment in the name that carries the name of the divine, or a name, or a reference to the divine in my characters' names. Now, these are magic angel, guardian angel insects, like I said, but I'm also taking inspiration from tokusatsu. Tokusatsu, if you don't know, it's a Japanese word. It means special effects. It refers most specifically to live-action Japanese film and TV products, whatever, that feature special effects. What kinds of special effects, you may ask? Supposedly, it's any kinds. What is the most typical case for the special effects that I'm talking about? Men in rubber suits, wrecking miniature sets of cities or countrysides. Yes, I'm talking about Godzilla. Yes, I'm talking about Ultraman. Monsters of gigantic size being fought by robots with people inside of them, piloting them in a combination robot at Super Sentai or Power Rangers, as most people know it, or a common version of it. And they get into these combination robots and they combine together into a giant mecha that fights monsters. Then there's things like Kamen Rider, and I already said Ultraman. And there's lots of other tokusatsu sci-fi products. Those are the kinds of things I'm into. I enjoy those a lot, along with studying the Bible and other things. So I've got a weird wide range of eclectic interests. So I'm bringing that all to the table. Also, I believe that anime has tokusatsu elements in it a lot of the time. I believe specifically Digimon is full of Ultraman and Godzilla and other tokusatsu references, even to the point where in the fourth season of Digimon, the children who are in the digital world actually become Digimon. They transform into them like a Power Ranger, like a Kamen Rider would, maybe even like an Ultraman would, you could say, or Power Ranger or Super Sentai. So that's part of my context. So why is that relevant? Well, each of my first 5 Growbug books that I've written the drafts for and that I'm working on getting finished, I'm working on refining them, doing the drafts, second and third drafts, etc., and getting them all to be a cohesive unit. They're all inspired by different tokusatsu. I mentioned them all already: Godzilla, Ultraman, Super Sentai, Kamen Rider, or Kamen Rider, then Super Sentai, then Digimon. And I already told you why I consider that to be tokusatsu. So they're all inspired by those things. So I thought, well, I'll give each of the Growbug characters in these books a name that is rooted in and based on the specific tokusatsu property that is being referenced or homaged in that particular book. So in my first book, I have Godzilla, which in the Japanese it's called Gojira, or Gojira, and I just changed the emphasis on that. That's all I did. I'm pedantic like that sometimes. But anyway, I thought, well, can I take this suffix luz, L-U-Z, and combine it with Gojira somehow in order to make the angel's name? Gojira luz. No, that's not what I want. Go luz, maybe. G luz, maybe. Ra luz, possibly. Goji luz, Ra luz, something like that, because that's breaking down Goji Ra into 3 different syllables and making a name out of it. And some of the angel names in the Bible are long. Michael, that's 3 syllables. Raphael is 3 syllables again. Gabriel, a lot of them I think are that way. Anyway, I don't know all the other angels, but those are some of them, and those are their names. They're all 3 syllables. So if I could do Goji Luz, that would fit within the paradigm of what I'm doing. I am identifying a structure that I want to mimic or emulate in this instance, specifically for naming these particular characters, and I'm breaking it down and saying, well, all of them mean different things. Raphael is the angel of healing. Rapha is healing, and El means of God or whatever. That's how it's typically translated. Michael means who is like God. That is typically the angel known as the angel of the Lord, and it's supposed to be like this most powerful angel who represents God. So you would say this is the angel who is like God. Not who is like God, the question, but this is the angel who is in fact like God, because they speak in the space or name or in the presence of God instead, as like an intermediary. And then Gavriel means, I believe it means strength of God, or like it's something to do with strength, because Gavur is strength or severity, and that's an angel of judgment. So like when Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed, I believe the text says that the angel went and destroyed it. That's identified in rabbinic literature as Gavriel or Gabriel, the angel. So because he is severe, he is the one who brings down punishment. Whereas before the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, actually, Raphael was there because there were three angels, I believe it says specifically, that visited Abraham after his circumcision, and that was Raphael was one of them who actually helped to heal or speed along the healing of Abraham's circumcision, which was a surgery which you would need to be healed from. So anyway, I'm taking that kind of concept of how it's broken down in the actual naming of angels according to like Jewish texts, and I'm putting that together with this concept. Okay, I got a tokusatsu and I've got this, suffix that means basically of the divine, and I'm combining them together. So my first one, I've got two characters in the book who have names like this because they're grow bugs. There's a spider and there's a praying mantis, and one of them needs to have one name and one of them needs to have another. So I think I'm going to go with Jilus and Ralus. And those sound strange, but it's supposed to sound strange because these aren't normal characters. It's not an everyday thing. It's, fantastical and wonderful. And I'm hoping that those names convey that. And that's part of the rationale behind, how I'm naming these characters. But I have more to say on the matter. I just need to pivot real quick and think about what exactly I'm going to say. So I'll be back in a moment. So in this instance, I am using kind of cultural and etymological and like a structural template that's been set up for me that I'm copying. So that works for this because it's kind of fantasy stories, they're magical bugs, right? So it's kind of a fantasy story or set of stories, and it's a whole fantasy world that exists. And this is actually, well, I won't say that. But so I suppose how you name your characters should be dependent upon your context. If you're writing sweet romance versus if you're writing hard science fiction versus if you're writing fantasy or drama or literary fiction or whatever, you may have to change your approach. You may have to change the rules. And I jotted down some things which will be in the show notes, and I asked a couple questions. Do you just pick names that you like for your characters? Do you pick names that are related to the theme of the story? Do you pick names that are related to the title? If you pick something related to the title or the theme, is that just your main character, or is that everybody? Or is it one of those books with an eponymous title? And then you have weird, well, I guess it's a whole different genre, but pulps, you have they are and they aren't eponymous. So like the Shadow books, I looked at a bunch of them. They're not all called the Shadow : such and such. It's The Living Shadow is the first book. There's The Eyes of the Shadow. There's The Black Master. The Golden Master, I think, is one. Lots of different titles. And I don't know, like, as far as like trade dress is concerned or whatever, they all had an image of the shadow on them, or the shadow menacing somebody on them. So that's how that worked. And that's more specifically talking about like series and things like that. But those were also, much older books. Those were published in the Shadow magazine. I think every month there would be a new novel. So, 50,000 word, approximately 40 to 60,000 words, I think is the length that they usually went with on those. But anyway, you have that kind of idea, or, I'm a Star Wars fan, so I'll read, Star Wars, Kenobi, whatever, or, just Star Wars Kenobi. So you can have it, it's the name of the series plus the name of a character. You can do that. So eponymous titles definitely work. I don't feel like eponymous titles work for every genre, but there's probably, I don't know. I'm trying to think of books now. I'm trying to think of books in other genres. But like the only thing that's popping into my head at the moment is like, The Notebook and Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants, because I know those are books. The Martian, what's that, by David Weir? That's kind of a misleading title. The guy's not really a Martian, but he's a human who gets stuck on Mars, so therefore he is technically a Martian, just like, you and I would be Terran living on the Earth. So that kind of thing. So, and like, I don't know if most people want their titles to fake out their readers, or if they want them to be very direct and very clear as to what they are. Again, I suppose that depends on what genre you're working in. I think because I'm working in children's books, Grow Bug Tales, or So-and-so and the Grow Bug, which is the titling structure for my children's picture books, it makes sense. It puts an emphasis on the kid, and it puts an emphasis on the fact that you are having some fantastical element in it, which is the Grow Bug. But I have veered into talking about titles for books as opposed to talking about names for characters, so I will pivot back to that real quick. and my humblest apologies for that. You want to come back later, I will have an episode where I'm talking about titling books and titling series, but we'll get into that. Anyway, so there are different structures, and I'd be curious to see what other people do or how they pick their names. For fantasy, there's always the temptation to just make up names, or for science fiction, more like Star Wars, which is a blend of science fiction and fantasy, I would say. They have there's no Steve Skywalker, but originally there was Zeke Skywalker, and Zeke is definitely a name or a nickname in the United States. So there's that. Again, Obi-Wan, but then there's also Ben. So there's kind of an interesting mixture of standard Earthling, Western American type names, and then they combine those with other things. So, and again, that's just depending upon your genre, I guess. You'll have to figure out what to do with that. But personally, I like names that make sense. I also, here's another thing I wrote down. When you pick your names, do you want to have them all start with the letter J, for example? Or do you want to have them all start with different letters? Or do you want to have them all, make sure you don't have I was going to say Courtney and Whitney, but that kind of has a bit of a flow to it. You could have a Courtney and a Whitney, but you probably wouldn't want to have a Courtney and a Cordelia in your book, because then that's two people who have Cor as the first part of their name. And I would think the first part of somebody's name is more impactful, it weighs more in the memory than the last part of their name, or the third syllable, fourth syllable, fifth syllable in their name. Just especially the way we come up with nicknames. Lots of people become, a Brittany will become Brit, Courtney will become Cor, a David will become Dave, all sorts of things like that. So, although I've never heard of Sean called a Shaw, but I guess he's dropping one letter doesn't really make sense. But some people do that for their names, depending. So, and then, do you want to consider nicknames in how you're naming your characters? I don't know. It depends, and I think that's a big question. But I more just kind of wanted to talk about the mechanics of it. I've shared with you my methodology for how I'm picking names, at least for these fantasy stories. And then actually, I will tell you, for my global superhero story that I have planned, which will be, series upon series, I do plan on each title character having their name. Of course, they have their superhero name, and they have their civilian alter ego, or however you call that. And because I want them to be all around the world, I'm not going to have them be called, Bob, Bob Champagne or Bob Champagne, and Steve. I can't think of any other Steve Akbar or whatever. Like, I would have names rooted in their culture, but I think a caution with that is you don't want to be silly and call somebody John. You don't want to be like a Japanese writer in Japan calling people, you don't want to have Tom, Dick, and Harry and John Smith in your book. That's a little too much. But those are real names, so it kind of depends. I would say if you're going to do something like that, like a cliche, American or white American name, for example, you would want to have one of those in a book, and maybe they're a side character or something. And you wouldn't want to have that be every single name, just so that there's a better flow. But for me, that's my preference. And I'm saying I think that's going to serve your audience better, because they don't have this clash of all these names sounding so similar, where it becomes easy to confuse the characters for one another, and then it makes the story more difficult to follow. Because you got to think about this, you're writing to your audience. Even though I think you should write what you want to write, you should present what you want to write in the most palatable way for your audience, so that they don't have to work as hard to track with it. Whether they're reading to it or listening to the audiobook or whatever, they should be able to easily follow along. Because if you're not doing that, then I think you're doing a disservice to your audience, and ultimately you're doing a disservice to yourself, because you're making your books less accessible, less easy to read. And and then definitely I don't like certain constructions of sci-fi or fantasy names. They're too difficult to read a lot of the times. You have to really guess or work hard at how you're supposed to pronounce these names. For example, when I started earnestly reading Star Wars books, in high school I read the Zahn trilogy, Timothy Zahn trilogy, which is the Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising and Last Command, I think, are the titles of the books. And there's Grand Admiral Thrawn, great villain name, simple, one syllable, sounds regal, has a bit of gravitas to it, Thrawn, it's got a good sound to it. And then his, Captain, I think it's Captain Pelleon. Pleon. I had no idea how to pronounce that. I think I only learned how to pronounce it once I heard that there was an audiobook, or I heard maybe people talking about it on a Star Wars podcast. But until then, I was just like, yeah, I guess it's whatever. And I honestly just glossed over it in my mind, which there's an advantage to that, especially for, if you're putting out something as a print novel or an ebook only, or whether it's print or e-format only, if somebody's just reading off the screen, that you can kind of fudge things a little bit and get weird with how you spell things. But at the same time, do you really want to do that? Again, my argument for accessibility and for ease of digestibility, you don't want to. Now, it's nice probably to spice things up a little bit, but again, it would depend on your genre, and I don't think your literary fiction or your sweet romance needs to have crazy character names that stand out. But you can have names that work with each other, and I think that's really cute. I definitely think it's something you should do for something like that. A drama or a fantasy with team members, do their names really need to go together and have a certain music or symmetry or unity to them? I would say no, it's less likely that they need that. And I would say it's a detriment to you a little bit if you have all their names sounding the same. Honestly, as much as I love The Hobbit, and I like The Hobbit more than I like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, I think it's a better overall single story. And, because, as you may or may not know, the Lord of the Rings trilogy was originally going to be a single manuscript of an enormous, immense, massive book. And Tolkien was told that he could not publish it like that. So he split it up into multiple pieces. And that's not apocryphal information. That's coming from Blackstone on the audiobook version of it from the, the appendices, not the appendices, but there's information from the publisher about the books, and that's part of the history of the publication. Anyway, so there's that to consider. But I'm getting to my larger point. While I can sort of appreciate the ease of remembering Feely, Keely, Hoyne, and Gloin, Bifer, Boofer, Bomber, it's also kind of like, I don't know, it feels a little unsophisticated. And I don't need to be pretentious in everything I do, but I don't know that names work like that in a culture. Star Wars has a little bit of a problem like that too, where a character will get an official name from a movie, and then people will have names that sound like that with one letter changed or something like that. Like, Han and Dan. Like, this is Han Solo's cousin from Corellia. Ban Solo, or Ran Solo, or, like I said, Dan Solo. Even though that's going from Han to Han, but still. Or Ian Solo. You want to mix it up a little bit. Ian Solo. And it's like, you don't have to do it like that. People can have names that don't sound immediately similar to the other names. I mean, there should be common things in a foreign language, but I think not like that. I think not like that. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here. Let me know in the comment section, however you want to comment. There's a variety of ways to do it. You can do it on the website. You can do it on the app that you're listening to this through, and you should definitely have that option pretty soon. I'm going to do my best to make sure that's turned on as quickly as possible, and I'd love to hear how you go about titling your characters and what you think of my approach to titling my characters, at least in these Growbook books. So, anyway, until next time, take care, folks, and be well. If you enjoyed me talking about the writing process, then hopefully you'll enjoy reading or listening to my writing instead. So go over to mjmunoz.com or mjmunoz.com/books and check out what I have there. My plan is to keep that updated all the time with the latest and greatest of my writing, whether that be books, audiobooks. You should be able to buy direct from me there. And yes, so please go ahead over there to MJ Munoz or mjmunoz.com/books and check out all the good stuff I have to offer there.